Good morning and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this Monday, the 24th of July, 2023. Hi, it's a glorious day out here in Brisbane. Cold, but glorious. Mostly cloudy, but at the moment there's sun shining around as well. 15 degrees. A little bit cold this morning. I tell you what, this morning, I would go for my very early morning walks, and I was just watching the rowers in those little skinny things that they are in. And I said, my God, being out there on the water at that time of the morning with that extreme cold and the clothes that they have to wear as rowers, I said, no, I'd rather be walking. But anyway, welcome to this show, and I hope you have a very, very great week. It is starting off very tidily, so it's going to be a very, very good week. That's a feeling I've got. Well, right now, let's get the news update from ABC.
850,000 casual workers across the country will have the chance to become permanent under planned industrial relations changes. Workplace Relations Minister Tony Burke will outline more details today around Labor's second tranche of IR laws set to be introduced to Parliament later this year. Mr Burke says the change will give workers more choice, but insists no worker will be forced to convert from casual to permanent employment. A 25-year-old man remains in a critical condition after being shot in the head during a triple shooting in Sydney's southwest early yesterday morning. A 22-year-old man was shot in the neck and is in a serious but stable condition. A third victim, a 19-year-old woman, is in a stable condition. Police say the shootings are believed to be targeted. The government has confirmed it will purchase 20 new American-made C-130 Hercules military cargo planes at a cost of $10 billion. The 20 new aircraft will replace 12 older Hercules based in Sydney as part of a deal with the US government. Defence sources say the government could also soon buy 2 KC-30 planes, which can refuel other aircraft in mid-air. And a state of emergency has been declared on the Greek island of Rhodes, where authorities are trying to contain 3 catastrophic fires. 19,000 residents and tourists have been moved from homes and hotels in what authorities say is the largest such effort Greece has ever seen. 16,000 have been transported by land and 3,000 by sea.
So there you are, ladies and gentlemen, up to date with the news. Well, first of all, let's look at this news, where Australia is going to be enforcing restrictions on people living with HIV.
So people who are wanting to migrate to Australia as permanent residents are being caught up in a system which is really decades and decades now out of date. Where people, simply because of their HIV status, are being put through years and years of uncertainty in order to hopefully finally be able to obtain a permanent residency visa. So we hear lots of stories of people who are well, who are living with HIV, who are treating for HIV, who can expect a long life expectancy, great quality of life, but who are spending 5, 6, 7 years going through a process because this condition, which is managed well, managed in the community, is tripping them up in becoming permanent residents of Australia.
So how many people are we talking about here?
This does affect thousands of people. It affects anyone who wants to migrate to Australia and who might have HIV. And that's really a concern where we hold ourselves up as a country that's really been at the forefront of driving a compassionate and a pragmatic response to HIV. And we do really have a very proud story to tell. But in this one area, we are decades behind other countries, the US, the UK. All of these arrangements have been swept away, this fear of people with HIV that restricts their mobility. And yet we still have this legacy system in Australia that needs to be swept away.
I think you've called our current policy an anachronism, but why do they face these restrictions? What is the authorities' motivation here?
So in many decades past, HIV treatment was expensive and life expectancy was uncertain. HIV was a fatal condition for people who were undiagnosed or who weren't treating or who didn't have access to the sorts of drugs, the treatments that we have today. And so in those times, HIV could be quite an expensive condition, but that's not the case today. We have very, very good treatment. People can expect to live a long and healthy life. And people live in the community. For most people with HIV, it's taking a single pill a day at breakfast, with their breakfast, with a glass of water, and yet they're being caught up in this system that assumes that somehow they'll be a burden on the taxpayer, and that's simply not the case. These are people who are wanting to come to Australia, who are often workers or who are students, who are bringing a lot of money into the Australian economy, but who are being held back from being able to become Australian citizens simply because they have HIV.
Well, the government can...
Well, what is your opinion on that? So, I mean, look, for people who are already here and things like that, if there's anything like that, it's managed, it's manageable, and things are happening which are good. But if we're letting people into the country, should the health check or the health requirement be mandatory? I'd love to get your thoughts on that as well, because that is inviting people into the country knowingly that they have a health condition which could be detrimental, which could spread into the community, or which could be a potential threat to the community. I'm not saying it is, but potentially. So, should the health screening be mandatory? Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now, moving on, the next news is on rates. What's the outlook?
Not only will interest rates probably not rise before Michelle Bullock takes over as Governor of the Reserve Bank in mid-September, they shouldn't increase afterwards either, for quite a while.
In fact, she should repeat what the outgoing Governor Philip Lowe did when he took over in 2016. That is, nothing, for 29 monthly meetings of the board. And when Philip Lowe eventually did something, it was to cut and then hold over 3 years. First because inflation was too low, and then we all got sick. And then, well, we all know what happened next.
And now there's a good chance that interest rates will stay where they are for a long time, maybe even another 12 months. Why? Well, because 12 rate hikes in quick succession has slowed the economy enough, as you'd expect.
Spending is down. We can see the impact of higher rates on spending everywhere. Groceries, eating out, fast food, even toys, and travel. The good news is that employment is strong, at least for the moment.
If you're hoping for rate cuts, be careful what you wish for. That would mean there's a recession, with unemployment above 5 or 6%. Now, as it happens, the average cash rate over the past 30 years is 4.1%, same as it is now. Perhaps we should just stick with that.
That's a very sound advice. Let's stick with that so that people can plan around, budget things around properly. But as he mentioned that, those adjustments and the rate hikes to slow the inflation is good, but it could also result in a recession. So there is always repercussions, there is always consequences of these decisions. We'll have to just wait and see. Right now, the other part is the housing sector, where we have lots of problems at the moment, the shortages at this point in time. So Victorian government is considering some changes or reforms.
A calamitous week for the Premier ended with more rain on his parade.
Give incentive for a relatively quick press conference today, I think. Karen, how are you?
In Frankston, for a progress check on hospital upgrades, the focus soon turned to home.
Housing, housing and more housing.
Within weeks, the government is expected to deliver sweeping changes to address the state's housing crisis. In the mix is a cap on rental increases, as well as limiting them to every 2 years instead of 1.
Everything is on the table. There's a very long list of different policy approaches, different things we can do. We're shortening that list down.
Rents have risen as vacancy rates plummet. Symptoms, many stakeholders agree, of a desperate need for more homes.
For renters, it will mean ultimately, and over the longer haul, that rents will actually go up because there'll be less supply of housing.
The government's challenge is pulling the right levers at the right time.
So you can't provide any more details on the planning and housing overlay?
Not today, because the government hasn't made any decisions about that yet.
Talk of a break on rent increases has been welcomed by the Victorian Greens, who've been pushing for a 2-year rent freeze for a number of months. But with a parliamentary inquiry into the state's rental crisis already underway, the state opposition says it's a smokescreen.
They're looking desperately for a distraction to get everybody's attention away from the Commonwealth Games fiasco.
John Pursuto's federal counterparts want the Prime Minister to intervene after Victoria abruptly pulled the plug on the 2026 Games.
There should be a really strong message going to the Prime Minister. Already there's a strong message going to Daniel Andrews that this is just not good enough.
The cost of walking away from the Games is yet to be revealed.
Thanks, guys.
Jesse Thompson, ABC News.
So there you go. Is it taking the attention away from the Commonwealth Games? Well, right now, as they said, looking at the housing things, if rents are frozen and things like that, it will scare investors away. And what happens when you scare investors away? They don't buy investment properties. And what happens when there's not enough investment properties in the market? The shortage again increases. So it is not solving the problem. It is definitely just not solving the problems. You need to attract more investors to come in and get more rental properties on the market. That's what's going to solve the problem, not penalizing the people who are providing this accommodation to the masses. Well, right now, this in today's day and age, text messages and messengers and everything like that. Not everyone always gets this right, even police and MPs, as this New South Wales Liberal MP Taylor Martin had to apologise.
Taylor Martin was just 26 when he gave his maiden speech in 2017.
As the youngest member in the first and oldest parliament in the country.
He won pre-selection to replace former Police Minister Michael Gallagher in the upper house. Now 32, Mr Martin has agreed to step aside from the Liberal Party room after a formal complaint was lodged against him. The ABC understands it was made by a woman in the Liberal Party who had been in a relationship with Mr Martin. He's accused of sending her expletive-laden text messages. A source with direct knowledge of the matter says the allegations date from when he worked as a staffer in federal parliament some years ago. In a statement, Mr Martin says, "I was young and inexperienced, and I found myself involved in a situation that was way beyond me. There were heated words during my attempts to go separate ways that I sincerely regret. It was an ugly and undignified parting of ways. If I could undo any hurt that has been caused, I would do it in a heartbeat. I am so sorry and apologise unreservedly to everyone that has been caught up in it. I truly welcome the process that the party has commenced, and I intend to fully cooperate." Opposition leader Mark Speakman has spoken with Mr Martin. He will excuse himself from the party room for the time being.
I just don't know enough of the circumstances of the case to offer a commentary.
The Liberal Party has appointed a senior counsel to conduct an independent investigation. A spokesperson says the party is respecting the wishes of the woman who has come forward and is offering support. Alexander Lewis, ABC News, Sydney.
So there you are, as he mentioned, that it was at that point in time, and in a heated situation, there are many times many things that happen that people regret afterwards. So often it is best to walk away from those situations if you can, even if you are in a very, very heated phone conversation. It might not be rude to just hang up the phone then. When the other party is just going on, because the time is the best healer, as they reckon. Let it cool down a little bit, but if you just continue and the other party continues, it gets heated, and then, all of a sudden people lose all rationale, say things that they will often regret for the rest of their lives. So, the best solution is try to avoid those situations. We know it's inevitable that you will be in a situation like that, one time or other. But we are not trained enough to, realize what to do unless you are a trained mediator or, a trained negotiator. Just a normal person on the street might not know what to do. So if you can, just stop or walk away or hang up. That's my little tip. Well, right now, let's look at the triple shooting and the police believe it may be a targeted shooting.
Police say shots were fired at 2 cars parked in Greenacre in southwest Sydney. They found 3 people aged from 19 to 25 with injuries when they arrived at the scene just after 2 a.m. 2 men have been taken to hospital in a critical condition. One of them has head injuries and the other has injuries to his neck. A woman who sustained chest injuries is in a stable condition. Police found the car set on fire in nearby Regent's Park and say it could be linked to the shooting. Superintendent Simon Glasser says police are still investigating if this attack is targeted.
It's terrible behaviour. It's a very serious offence. People shooting at people. It could have resulted in a death at this stage, and it still may. We treat it at its highest. We put all our resources on it. Today we have a lot of police from Auburn Police Area Command, our neighbouring commands and State Crime Command assisting in this investigation.
He says police are looking for one shooter but warns it is early in the investigation.
So there you are, as they reckon that this was a targeted incident, it's a little bit shocking to see this kind of things happening right here on our streets. So right now, next one is the offer for permanent and casual workers. How casual workers could be given permanent positions.
There are 2.5 million casual workers in this country, and according to government figures, 850,000 of them are facing this problem. The problem, of course, is they're working permanent, regular hours, day in and day out, week after week, but they're still classified as casuals. And of course, as a casual, you're missing out on a lot of important benefits, including financial security, leave entitlements, not to mention job stability, more reliable rostering. And these new reforms proposed by the government are promising a clear definition that can determine who can be classified as a casual worker, and of course, in turn, a way for them to be able to gain permanency if they choose so. As we know, casual workers get casual loading, which some may not want to lose, which is why the government is making it very clear that this is optional and there would be no back pay involved. So if you convert from casual work to permanent contract, that doesn't mean that it will affect everything that happened in the past. There will be no back pay, for example. And Workplace Relations Minister Tony Burke says these new reforms will be closing a loophole that has allowed casual workers to be exploited and allowed employers to double dip, essentially, to have a reliable workforce that they can dip into and take advantage of their work without giving the benefits in return.
Today, all ladies and gentlemen, up to date on Australian Indian Radio. Well, right now, moving on, let's take a look at the news on these victims of the crash in Queensland's Sunshine Coast.
In the early hours of Friday morning, 2 mums were killed on the Sunshine Coast, as well as a 65-year-old man who tried to help. 25-year-old Gypsy Satterley is believed to have flagged down his car, which police allege was then pursued by her boyfriend, Rafferty Rolfe, and rammed.
My thoughts and sympathies are with the families and the community of those who have died. This is a heartbreaking incident.
Rolfe was the sole survivor of the shocking 3-car pile-up and is in hospital with head injuries and under police guard. In a statement to ABC News, Gypsy Satterley's family say they are absolutely devastated over this horrendous crash and send their deepest condolences to everyone impacted by this tragedy. They say Gypsy was a kind soul and a mother of 2 beautiful little girls. Miss Satterley's family also say they're very appreciative of the man who stopped to help her. He's a hero in their eyes and deserves a medal. They're also deeply sorry that he lost his life, as well as the other innocent driver. 38-year-old alpaca farmer Jessica Townley was also killed after the car Miss Satterley was a passenger in crossed lanes and slammed into hers. Her family and friends say she will be sadly missed. Police allege the car that caused the crash was stolen at knife point from a mum with 3 kids on Thursday.
You've got a young mum who went through an experience that no one should ever have with the kids in the car. You've got a community grieving the loss of lives.
Rolf has been charged with robbery with violence whilst armed. The matter is expected to be heard in Maroochydore Magistrates Court tomorrow. Michelle Tapper, ABC.
Such a tragic news, and when you look at the incidents like this, what drives people to do things like that? Once again, which I talked about, getting to a situation where you are not mentally stable, it just drives you insane, and you don't care about what you're going to do. You're not even worried about the consequences. You just go out and you'll do things like that. So, this is a very, very serious offense, and I'm sure that the authorities are dealing with it, but it is very, very unfortunate, and our heart goes out to the families of the people who lost their lives in that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's about all we have time for you today. From tomorrow, we'll bring to you the update version of the functions and events that are taking place as well. So, as usual, it's been wonderful having your company on this Monday, the 24th of July. As I speak, it's now gone up to 16 degrees and climbing. It is not a bad time of the year, but if you can handle the chill, the cold. So, whatever you do, always remain safe and wear appropriate clothes, if you're going out into the weather, and remain safe. Until tomorrow, it's goodbye from us.